We're going to start going through Project Kraken from the ground up. So we're going to start with Tentacle PLC, which is our PLC. Lives here on the edge and runs arbitrary code in a loop, just like any other PLC. We'll talk a little bit about the benefits, and then I'll go through setting one up from scratch. So one of the main benefits of running a soft PLC like Tentacle PLC is, well, first of all, Tentacle PLC is open source, unlike most soft PLCs or hardware PLCs for that matter. But also, it can run on any general purpose hardware. So a small edge PC, an I/O with some compute in it, a Raspberry Pi, or it can also run on a server if you want to run it on a server. It also works with general purpose I/O, so you can have your choice of many different remote I/O vendors, and you're not tied into a proprietary ecosystem anymore. You can use multiple vendors for multiple different things. You can mix and match vendors. You don't have to worry about being locked in. If there's a supply chain issue with one vendor, you can go with a different one, unlike some of these platforms on the right. For those of you who might be intimidated for setting up a small Linux box, I just wanted to run through the installation real quick to show you how easy it is. So first we'll go to Ubuntu's website and download Ubuntu server, just at ubuntu.com/download/server. And then we'll click and wait for the download. Be right back. So once you've downloaded Ubuntu, if you're already on Ubuntu like I am, then you can use the startup disk creator built into Ubuntu to write your image to whatever USB stick you'd like. You could also use Rufus if you're on Windows, or there's a few other tools. If you want, I can go through make a video in the future about doing it on other platforms. Install Ubuntu server. Speed through all these. And then we select English as our language. Select English as our keyboard. We use DHCP for our network interface. We let it check our mirrors. And then we can go ahead and set up our disk. We use the entire disk in our case. And this is where we have to be careful a little bit, because Ubuntu likes to give you only half the hard drive space by default for some reason. I'm not sure why. So we're going to change our logical volume to use the whole entire hard drive. It's probably the most complicated part of the install. Set up our user, which we'll do calling him generic sudoer. Our server's name will be edge1, and then we'll pick Ubuntu as our username, and we'll pick an arbitrary password. No need for Ubuntu Pro. And we'll install the OpenSSH server so we can SSH in. I'll use my GitHub IDs so that I don't have to type passwords. And we don't need any extra packages. Now we just wait for it to be done. And we've installed Ubuntu. Now that we have our Ubuntu environment ready to install Tentacle, I wanted to go over the architecture a little bit. We use containerization to manage our workloads and make it easy to deploy, and it makes Tentacle extremely easy to install and very flexible for wherever you want to install it. We're going to do the simplest version, which is just use Docker with docker-compose to install Tentacle and the containers that it uses. In the future, we'll talk about using Kubernetes or doing more advanced deployments. But there are 4 containers that are installed as our standard Docker Compose file, and that's Tentacle UI, which is the user interface that's web served for Tentacle, which we'll show off in a bit. And then Code Server, which is Codercom's VSCode in the browser, which allows you to use a modern software developer interface right in the browser for programming Tentacle, and then Caddy, which is a reverse proxy, and allows you to kind of get in just under one single entry point. Right, so first we're going to SSH into our Edge 1 box here, and then we're going to go to docs.docker.com, which I'm showing up there, where we can get the commands to install Docker. Super easy. Their documentation for Docker is excellent for whatever platform you're on. We're on Ubuntu, so we're just going to install using the apt repository just by copying and pasting these commands in. And it'll run through the install. Basically, once we run these two commands, then we will have Docker installed and we'll be ready to download our Docker Compose image from our GitHub repo. And it looks like we're ready to go. And now we can go to our GitHub repo and we can get the link to our standard Docker Compose file, which creates a Tentacle for us here. The best way to do this is to go to the raw and copy it, and then we can go ahead and paste it into our terminal to download. We also downloaded our Caddyfile, which is the configuration for our reverse proxy that I mentioned earlier. It's in the same location. And since we have our Docker Compose file, inside the Docker Compose file, we will go ahead and look to see that we need an environment variable. So we'll create a .m file with the code server password that we want to use. In this case, we'll just use Tentacle. And now we can bring up our Docker environment using docker compose up. Docker compose up -d. All of our containers will start downloading. And they're created. And now our Tentacle environment should be up. Now that Docker Compose is finished doing its thing, we should be able to go to Edge 1 and see the Tentacle PLC user interface. I configured a few things in here before recording this just so you could see what they look like, but there's variables and tasks. Changes, you can see what changes you've made since you last downloaded. Tasks are the code that's run periodically. It runs this task once a second. You can see what the task looks like by clicking the drop down here. This is the simple program we've created that just counts up this variable by once per second. And then you can edit your code in Code Server by clicking the Edit button, which gives you VSCode in the browser, so you get a modern IDE just built right into code to Tentacle PLC. Here you can see the tasks, which is main here, and then you've got your configuration for how often to run the tasks. You've got your variables that you define here, and we can edit the code. So we can edit this and make it count up by 2 and save. And if we go back, we can see that we made changes to the main program. We can download them. And now you should see that this variable will be counted up by 2. If we refresh, you can see that the code changed here. So that's just a simple overview. We'll go into more detail about what you can do with Tentacle PLC in future videos, but thanks for watching and stay tuned.